Thank you for joining another wonderful episode of Success Innovation. Today's episode is called Financial Planning. In this episode, I have the great pleasure of talking with LUCAS CASAREZ. He is a very knowledgeable and upbeat individual who is passionate about financial education of others. We learn about the difficulties of financial freedom and his suggestions on how to slowly and safely become comfortable with this topic. Discover his method of bringing peace of mind to teaching and sharing insight on financial advice to others. I had a great conversation with LUCAS CASAREZ. Thank you for joining. Let's get started. Welcome back to another wonderful episode of Success Innovation. Thank you so much to the audience, to the listeners, to the viewers for joining in this wonderful opportunity. Today, I have a great opportunity of talking to a wonderful individual. His name is LUCAS CASAREZ. He's a certified financial planner. He has been helping individuals understand and navigate the intricacies with the financial planning strategies that work. He's the founder of Power Up Tax Planning and Level Up Financial Planning. He is also a podcast host for the Techie Personal Finance Bootcamp. Welcome, LUCAS CASAREZ, to Success Innovation. How are you doing tonight, my friend?
I'm doing good. How are you doing tonight?
I'm doing really well. Thank you so much. So I give a little brief introduction about who you are. I know that right now you're in Colorado and we're still in the year 2020. It's November, at the beginning of November. And it's, things are a little hectic. And I see that you have your Christmas tree up. And I think that's what you mentioned. That's what you were doing today with the family. That's awesome. Amazing. Today, we're just going to briefly touch on your background, who you are, where you were born, and your upbringing. Can you kind of run through that really quickly for us and get to know you a little better?
Yeah, I am originally, so you mentioned I'm in Fort Collins, Colorado now. Originally, I was born in Round Lake Beach, Illinois. So it's a small northeast suburban area in Illinois. And so lived there my whole youth all the way through age 23. And basically, awesome childhood. Parents were awesome. The school districts and probably the neighborhoods and stuff weren't always the greatest. There was a lot of gang activity. Some of my family members got involved with that. And so it was definitely interesting because I didn't really realize how bad it was until my family kind of got involved with some of that stuff. And stuff can get pretty bad pretty quick. And so at about that same point when I was, it was probably about 2021, my parents decided they were leaving Illinois. They moved to Colorado. I was attending a community college part-time. I was working part-time at a community bank in Illinois. And I had all my friends and everything there. So originally I thought I was going to move with them to Colorado. I decided to stick around, finish my associate's degree, keep working my way up at the community bank I was working at. And they moved to Colorado. I didn't. And then a few years later, once I figured out what I wanted to do, because I was taking my sweet time through community college, I think from 18 to 22. So it took me 4 years to get an associate's basically, which is double the time that you'd expect. And then one of the reasons for that is I had no clue what I wanted to do. Working my way through the community bank I was working at, they had a lot of cool employer benefits. They had stock, a 401k, employer stock, and things like that. And that's what kind of piqued my interest in the financial planning.
And that's probably stuff that you were not really exposed to at home from what I kind of gather, right?
No, no one talks about these things.
Right.
Maybe we're going to do better for the youth and the next generation,
right.
But it's still a super taboo topic. And a lot of our parents just didn't feel comfortable with those things. And I've worked with anyone from in their 80s all the way down to 23. So that's a common occurrence. It's not just me. Most parents don't talk to their kids. If anything, it's usually like the grandparents who probably have a little bit less restrictions on how they talk and what they want to talk about. That usually, if someone did get a leg up or an early invitation to understand how finances work, is usually grandparents. It wasn't necessarily the parents having that conversation.
So did your grandparents actually talk to you about the financial aspect of things, or you didn't really have too much contact with your grandparents, or they were really not savvy enough to bring that topic up?
Yeah, and not savvy about it. One of the interesting things that if you just kind of look back historically how stuff has worked, life expectancies for our like great grandparents and grandparents weren't all as high as they are right now for our parents and ourselves. And so it's like every generation life expectancy kind of extends. And so financial planning wasn't really a huge need. Like you had to be able to get by month to month with, which most people can do month to month pretty good. It's when those emergencies sneak up on people. And so what happens is there wasn't a need for a lot of financial literacy. There wasn't a need for investment conversations because you turn on Social Security. Most of kind of my upbringing, it was just kind of moderate, kind of mid to lower middle class, basically. And so Social Security is going to take care of people until they passed away. And again, just with those older generations, they didn't stick around too much longer.
And that is still the mindset for a lot of the generation from my parents to probably your parents and grandparents, because that's what they knew. That's how they were brought up. That's what they saw others doing, et cetera, et cetera. Now I'm gonna touch on a little bit of what I know here, and maybe it's similar to you, but my parents were not necessarily financially savvy, meaning that at their work they weren't really provided with a 401k or some sort of financial investment portfolio of any sorts. That being said, education wise, they barely went to grade school, if at all, right? My dad only finished 1 week of first grade. So his his whole his whole financial savviness or education was being able to count the cash that he had in his pocket and possibly opening up a savings account. And that was as far as he got. And he didn't really talk about the stock market, didn't really talk about 401ks or investing in X and YZ companies or anything like that. So when I grew up, I didn't really have any idea as to what that meant. Now in high school, you take economics, but honestly, I substituted that course for something else
Yep.
because it was a little bit um, frightening, to be honest with you, to be talking about financial responsibility. I didn't really want to deal with that at the high school level. So I took political science versus economics. I wish I could go back and take more of an economics class because now I see the benefit of at least understanding what that means, right? So
Yeah.
you mentioned that you spent 4 years in community college. It's perfectly okay from my perspective, but I want to touch base on this particular topic because a lot of students, when they graduate high school, they're totally lost. So in that aspect, how did you navigate and find what you really wanted to do?
So I kind of mentioned it a little bit, but just from that exposure of being in the financial services industry, so helping people get credit cards, helping them understand like how their checking account works, how their savings account works, how to get all that stuff linked it up, how to keep track in a checkbook. So that's one of the things that I do recall from my economics class way back in high school. Not much stuck with me at all, but I did remember that there was a little task where you had to go through transactions and write them down in the checkbook and subtract and minus them. And so I was actually helping a lot of people from even at that community bank when I was 18 years old. I was helping people that were senior citizens and also people getting their first debit card, first checking account at like 16 and stuff. So I just saw how much it helps people just to give them that confidence and clarity as far as, hey, it's not as hard as you think. Kind of similar to how you were, like you're scared of it is a big unknown. It wasn't something that you're really excited to dive into because what if you find out that you're not good at it? Then no one likes those things. And so that's one of the things that makes it difficult for a lot of people. Once you put this stuff off for so long, you just want to kind of keep your head in the sand and not really acknowledge, hey, maybe you could be doing better. Maybe you could change your habits a little bit and improve. But I think just at that early age, I wasn't too social. I was very quiet. I'd help my people I was helping directly. And so I never really saw this for me in my future. But over the years, I've just kind of developed and changed and really found that to be something that really just lights me up. And like, I get so excited. I kind of relate it to if you've ever played sports or anything like that and you get that like adrenaline high of like a game. game day or whatever it is that kind of gets you like fired up. Like that's how I feel like going into client meetings. Like I prep, I'm like, all right, I got all these different ways I can add value. I just can't wait to find out more, see, make sure it makes sense. I think that's one thing I always need to make sure I caution myself. I think earlier in my career, I was really quick to be like, hey, this is the answer. This is what you need. But I've learned that there's a lot of complexity when it comes to financial situation. There's a lot of competing goals. There's a lot of things out there. So I have to ask a lot of questions first. I need to feel it out, make sure that what I'm going to recommend is actually going to be the best thing, not just a solution, but the very best solution to actually give them confidence, give them peace of mind. And I started seeing some of that stuff when I was at that community bank, just seeing how much it helps. And then one of the things when I was learning about the 401k that I had in the employer stock purchase plan, where you get a huge discount on employer stock, I was taking advantage of all this stuff because I was living with my parents still at the time. I didn't have much. It was all disposable income basically at that. So I did start saving, started doing the right things. I figured out how a rewards credit card works, started earning free money that way. And when I talked to my older colleagues, because I was the youngest one there, I was 18. And so there was a lot of 40, 50-year-olds like that. We have no clue. Or I worked with a lot of females and they're like, oh, my husband takes care of that. And that's not always necessarily a good answer because we don't know if your husband's doing the right thing. We don't know if your husband's confident in what he's doing. And so that can cause a lot of stress and financial issues there as well. And so it just showed me like, oh, financial planning was an actual career path. I think one of the biggest things that I didn't even know what the heck financial planning was. Like that was the biggest issue. It took me a handful of years to find out there was even a career path. My assumption, what everything told me, what everyone was telling me is you're good at math, you like the banking and the numbers, like go and do taxes. And that's what I was working towards, but I was doing horrible at school because I didn't like those classes. I wasn't driven. I wasn't excited about moving in and doing taxes. So just didn't do that great the first couple semesters. Once I figured out that this existed, then I got straight A's basically. I found out online is better for me than going into class because I'm a self-taught, self-learner type. I can absorb stuff really quick. And when I sit in class, like I can figure things out, and sitting around in a class just makes me super antsy. I like want to get to the next topic, and that just wasn't a good solution for me. And I figured that I think that's probably right when online started becoming available. What was that? 2014, 2000? No, whoa, way longer than that. I'm time is flying by too quick. So it's about holy moly. I
So
graduated.
online courses, I think, were around since 2008, somewhere around there. That's when they first, like, actual online courses. I mean, the internet's been around since the early 90s,
Yeah.
but it's developed over the time. So let me ask you a couple more questions now that we kind of got into the topic of you becoming a certified financial planner. Are you focusing mainly on options, investments, or are you also doing a study of financial planning for wills and living trust and any of so you're doing the whole package? Is that what I understand?
Yeah, the whole package is really the only thing that I haven't dove into too much, but I am starting to get this interest and just being a business owner myself. So one of the things I would always tell people when I first came out, I was doing all the networking, meeting with a lot of business owners and realizing they weren't a good fit. I wasn't confident with helping business owners with their stuff. But lately, since doing taxes for them and things like that, and having my business now for over 3 years, I'm like, actually, your business finances are actually pretty similar to your personal finances. So previously I would say like, oh, I basically do anything personal finance wise, but I won't help in any way with the business stuff. I'm just afraid to break something or not give you the correct advice, but I've realized that it's pretty similar. And so, yeah, comprehensive. We talk about cash flow, like your budget, debt management, insurance, making sure you have the proper amount of insurance, the estate planning, which includes the wills, the powers of attorneys, all that fun stuff, investments, retirement, social security, and then all the different ways you can kind of split that stuff up to the important goals, like getting married, saving for vacation, just being financially confident, account for every single financial possibility in people's lives.
It's awesome. So I'm going to go back about 3 years now. You mentioned that you opened up your own practice, your own company, essentially. What was the catalyst for that to happen? How did you say, I'm ready to venture wholeheartedly without a corporation backing me up with healthcare, social security, paid vacation, a stable monthly income. How did you decide to go about doing that?
Yeah, it wasn't something that happened overnight. So kind of we skipped a little bit of like the college years. I worked my way through all of college, even my bachelor's degree, and I was working at a credit union that served tech professionals. Once I graduated and was starting to look for a job, I was freaking out because there's a lot of financial advisors out there. There's not a lot of financial planners, and the difference is you asked if I mainly like help with investments. That is what a lot of advisors just do. They only do investments. They don't help you plan for your future. They don't help you really optimize too much. They might have some boilerplate stuff that the overlord, the big company that they work for just says, hey, this is what you say, this is how you do this, and this is why we do it. And so I was freaked out that I was going to have to go there because a lot of times those are very sales heavy cultures. And I was like, I'm not going to be good in sales. I don't know that many people I would be able to get right away. So I need to do real financial planning. And I was freaking out because there's not that many in Colorado. Colorado is very north and south kind of state. And then like there's a big highway and that's where all the cities kind of run. And so if I wanted to find something, I had to go to Denver, which is an hour and a half away. And I was starting to build a family and things like that. It's like, I don't want to move. We love it here. And so I was doing research while applying for jobs to see if I can find a good fit for what I wanted to be and do. And I started finding things like, oh, people can start this on their own. They don't need a company like that. So that kind of loosened up some things. I actually did find a great fit where it's like, yes, we do financial planning. We've grown so big. We need help. You don't have to go get clients. You don't have to sell anything. We have existing clients that need your help. And so I kind of tucked in there. And one of the things that really sped up my process for feeling confident I could start my own company was it was a single advisor I was going in and helping. We had a small team around us for operation support. And he had a lot of personal things going on where he was actually out of the pocket. I'd had to say 75% of the 3 years that I was there working. And so a lot of times very quickly, I was just thrown in like, hey, he's not here. We don't know when he's coming back. And we have $1 million clients, like multi-million dollar clients. And that happened on the day where all of those ones, some advisors, they categorize these clients and households by like the higher the class. And it's like an A+ client. And then like as low as C clients. Normally I'd be working with like the C and B clients because I was newer and I was kind of getting them. It's lower risk for the advisor having help someone with $1 million or less versus the $2 and $3 million clients. That day that I got that call and he said, nope, just run with it. I trust you. I don't know when I'm coming back. So we just need to handle these all A+ clients. I was freaking out, but I did awesome, as awesome as I could for that situation. And that was a pretty regular occurrence after that point. Basically, like, yep.
I think he probably saw a lot of potential in you, and he
Mhm.
believed in what he saw as far as your skills go, and what you had at that point with the experience that you acquired. And he oversaw you for a while, so he felt really comfortable, from my perspective, to leave you to handle that situation on your own, and that showed a lot of trust. And not I'm speaking from my perspective from the story that you're sharing right now, that he might have just done it as a test to see what you actually were able to do, to see if you could actually handle that type of situation, essentially, so he could kind of back off a little and allow you to step into those big game type of scenarios. So
Yeah,
just my
yeah,
take on it.
it's possible because yeah, there was the issue of I showed and proved I could do it, and then all of a sudden it just meant he was around less and less, and it was totally random. So if I had scheduled for my own schedule like 2 to 3 client meetings, all of a sudden he's out. I was like, all right, well, we have to figure out how I'm gonna like do all these and then do all the follow up work and make sure that people are happy because they were all his clients essentially before I started helping out.
Right.
And so it was definitely a tricky kind of thing to navigate. But yeah, over the course, I had to say that started pretty quickly, like a few months into it, where that was just a regular occurrence. And so after 3 years, I just gained the confidence. And the biggest issue with what I was doing there, they were doing awesome work, doing real financial planning. There was always some conflicts of interest, things I thought that maybe if I was going to ever build something, I could do something better and kind of remove some of these things, like maybe the higher cost, like investment choices where we're kind of restricted, our hands were tied. Even though he's independent, he partnered up with some company and it said basically we have to use them for all of their investments, even though I wasn't a fan of their performance or the costs and things like that. So that was just a small thing. But then also the big difference in model is he serves pre-retirees, people in their 50s and 60s. Basically, you had to have $500,000 or more in investments in order to work there. And I really wanted to help people as much as possible. And that means going early as I can, early as I can possibly kind of make my costs affordable for younger people. And
So your focus is the younger generation, professional, entry level type of thing, 30s, 40s, even down to the 20s. So now we're going to start talking about 401ks. This is more prevalent now. About 20 years ago, it wasn't so obvious. It was mainly you go into a corporation, you get offered, and you get vested into the pension. Now
yeah,
that about 20 years ago, it stopped going. There's a couple of corporations that still offer it, but for the most part, it's a 401k. Now, 401ks, you have large investment companies that come and do it for you. So you don't really, as an employee, you don't really put too much thought into it. You just kind of say, okay, I want to go into the 2041 retirement plan, 2042, 47, and whatever mutual funds, whatever thing that they pick, that they pre-package for you, is whatever you're going to be invested in. And when I say invested, is they take a certain percentage out of your hard-earned salary and they put it directly tax deferred into that account, and then you kind of just assume that it's going to grow until you are ready to retire at that time and pull it out with increase and growth and whatever. Now, some companies actually do provide some matching, and this is where I urge a lot of the young professionals, because that's kind of the crowd that I'm targeting right now with this episode, the young professionals, to go ahead and investigate, make your due diligence. I know that you have college loans that you still want to pay off. So
yeah.
this is where it gets a little tricky. Some students / young professionals want to focus and get all their salary and spend it into paying off those loans. That's a great idea to a certain degree. But I also urge you to try to take advantage of the 3, 4, 5% that the company matches, because if you put 3 or 4% and the company matches that, then you are adding 6% every month or whatever. What is your take on that?
Yeah, I cannot agree with you any more, Laszlo. Free money basically is what they call that employer match. And I think one of the things that happened when I was younger and I first had that, it was something where I was like, I'm like trying to work my way through school. Like the budget's high. I was only part-time and I had a 401k and I had to juggle part-time school. And I was like, how long am I actually going to be here? And I'm glad that I educated myself enough to realize like, let's just do it. It's still, you always get your own money back. Every now and then, depending on how your employer's 401k plan is set up, is they'll do a match, but sometimes you have to stay there like 3 years or 5 years in order to get that 100% of what they put in. You always get your own money back though, and you take that with you wherever you go. And so that's the tricky thing is your mind's going to play tricks on you, thinking, I'm only going to be here another 3 months. I'm actively looking for another job. That's what I thought. And I stuck around back at the community bank while I was working my way through community college about 4 years. And yeah, by the time I left, everything was vested and it ended up being a really good deal for me. But I think right away, like I think when you're young, you just don't know where you're going to be in like 3 months or 6 months. So it's easy to talk yourself out of it, but it's all your money. The free money is gravy on top. And from a percentage wise, if you're trying to balance this against student loan interest, hopefully your student loans are federal. Right now, during the pandemic, things have been your federal student loans, deferred payments, no interest being charged ever since this pandemic first started. So hopefully it hasn't been an issue right now. But even when you do it, as long as it's a federal student loans, you're probably not paying any more than 7%. And if you do the math on a 3% contribution you do and a 3% that your employer matches, that's 100%. So 100% return is better than a negative interest rate of 7%. And so find a way to make and take advantage of that 401k as much as possible. If it means you can't go to Starbucks every day or you have to go every other day, just find a way to make it happen. And then still make those student loan payments. Obviously, you don't want to, once those start up, you want to, but if you miss those payments, you're going to get a ding on your credit. So find a way to make these things both happen. And if this is the younger generation, like, you can make it happen. The problem is, as your income goes up, we're just going to find ways to spend it, and we're not going to find ways to actually use it always in the best way, paying down student loans faster. If you accidentally accumulated credit card debt at 22% interest, you want to target these things. And what happens is you're like, oh, I get to just make this minimum payment and my monthly cash flow feels fine. I feel fine month to month because I'm not actively trying to pay this stuff down. That interest is super expensive. It's going to cost you hundreds of thousands of dollars. And if you just carry it forever, it's going to be ridiculous. If you think the mortgage interest that you end up paying over the course of a 30-year loan looks crazy, that's on a 2 or 3% interest rate right now.
Right.
If you're paying 22% for the just indefinitely, it's going to dwarf whatever you pay in mortgage interest.
Right, exactly. And now, with that being said, a lot of young professionals are trying to figure out, okay, at least in California, from what I know, home prices are skyrocketing. The interest is low enough, but the home prices are immensely huge here. For a small house, you're paying over $350,000, and that's you're looking for like a 2-bedroom, 1-bathroom, single story, with no backyard or anything like that. So it's really incredible. Now we get to those young professionals where they have just graduated college, they have an immense amount of debt, and they're faced with, okay, do I pay my mortgage, do I pay my college debt? Do I invest in the 401k? Or better yet, we have those investment applications like Robinhood, Webull, or Fin, or Acorns, or all those that kind of just popped up within the last 5 or 6, less than a decade, have been kind of more prevalent, where there's no commission fees, anything like that.
Yep.
And they're thinking, if I put my money in there and I invested myself, I can definitely go ahead and double my money in 1-2 years and be rich. What are your thoughts about that?
So I think that is the thought, right? When a lot of times when you're young and you're like, oh, this seems easy. It seems like free money, easy money, just the same as your employer 401k. Definitely not the same as your employer 401k. The biggest difference is diversification. So because your employer does not want to get sued, all the investment choices you make in your 401k are always going to be diversified. They might be focused in like one area specifically, like a large US companies, but there's going to be like 500 different companies in that kind of bundle package that you mentioned, even if you are not as diversified as you could be. On those free trade-in apps, a lot of times you'll pick individual stocks, individual companies, and historically there's been a lot of well-known, well thought of companies that go bankrupt in unexpected times. And so that's important to just realize that you're taking a lot more risk than you probably know. You have no idea. Almost, at least my younger clients, so many of them think that, you know what, I'm comfortable with risk. I could take a lot of risk because it means I'm going to get a better return. If I do an assessment that's kind of behavioral based and has some scientific research behind it, what we see is they're not anywhere near the risk taker they think they are. And because when times are good, like they have been for the last 10 years, which is when people have been having access to these things, for the last 10 years, everything has gone up. And so it kind of gives you that false sense of feeling like, oh, there's no other way but up. And in diversified assets, that's definitely been the case. But in single individual stocks, it definitely could go to zero, or it could just be severely hammered. I tell a lot of the clients I've worked with in the past worked at HP here in Fort Collins, and well-known company Hewlett Packard. It's split so many different ways. The stock got hammered about 15, 20 years ago, and it's never recovered. And so there's still people, if you run into like an old HP person, like, yeah, I still got that stock. And then they're just grumbling about it because they couldn't sell it because it was doing so well the first 10 or 20 years of their career. And so those apps, though, are great kind of entry into kind of the investing world, you want to use it as a way to test things and figure out how stuff works. But if it is kind of that decision, this or this, you always want to do the employer 401k with that free match first, because that is a guaranteed 100% return on that match. The excess funds, that's when you can start playing around a little bit. And what I like to tell my clients is I don't necessarily care what you do. If you want to manage your own investments, if you want to choose these things, just make sure you're comfortable with the worst case scenario, because that's really what you have to gauge. And usually once we have that conversation, it's like, all right, this amount of money I want to actually use for real planning and make sure it goes towards things that I'm confident in, so that I'm not going to lose sleep. I'm not going to stress or freak out when earlier this year when COVID hit, the stock market fell about 35%. People were freaking out. Those clients that said, I have a high risk tolerance, they said, oh my God, what's going on? It's never going to come back. We've never seen anything like this before. And like, yes, COVID is a kind of a new situation and all the results of that, but the stock market doesn't necessarily care about everything that's going on in the world. What they care about is growth of companies. And there's a lot of companies still growing despite what's going on in the country. And so it just really gave a good reminder. I'm going to be able to use it now in the future to be like, hey, remember when you said that you wanted to get super risky? And I said, hey, let's be more diversified and let's be careful. And then you called me and you were freaking out. Like those things don't jive. And this is why we need that diversification. We need an actual plan. If we didn't have a plan in place, there would be nothing for me to tie any of my conversation to. I wouldn't be able to talk them down off the wall. So if you do have that excess income and you want to test things out, do it with a small amount. Definitely really good for that. The best thing about these things is they brought down the fees for everyone. So even Fidelity, even TD Ameritrade, even Schwab all went to zero fees as a result of these companies. So that's the best thing that came about all this is it's not just young people getting access. It's everyone that had been doing this before anyways on these larger platforms. They all have free and we're not going to go into the wormholes of how some of these things work, but nothing is free, basically.
Exactly. I mean, I remember that in ShareBuilder a long time ago, when it first popped up, you had to pay like $4 per trade. So you had to be really careful as to what you wanted to trade and how much you wanted to trade, and you bundle it up and then do a trade on that. And otherwise you'd be buying one share, paying $4 for that trade, and then so on and so forth. So you really want it to be savvy enough to be able to keep that cost down. Otherwise, your investment would not be worthy because you'd have so many fees tacked onto it. So I also want to touch base on estate planning, because you mentioned living trust and wills, et cetera, et cetera. For the younger crowd, for the younger professional, they come out of college and they have their first professional job, be it an engineering job or a banking job, or be it some white collar job. Mm-hmm. So at that point, they're thinking, well, within the first year to 5 years of employment, they're thinking, I don't need a living trust. I don't need a will. I don't need any of that because, I don't have anything to show or leave to anybody in my life. What is your opinion and advice on that respect?
So it definitely depends. A big part of it is responsibility. I have some single clients that are like, I'm single. I'm always going to be single. That's like not even like, there's never a thought that would be any different. Unless someone like abducted my body and changed everything about the way I think about stuff. And so for certain people, it's not as crucial, but then a lot of my clients, when they come to me, they have significant others and things get messy. If let's say before me and my wife got married, we were boyfriend and girlfriend, and we bought a house together as boyfriend and girlfriend. And the thought was always, yep, we're going to get married, but I wanted to save for the ring, save for the wedding. So like that was really the biggest sticking point. And we ended up getting our estate documents done because if something happened to me, the person who I trusted the most, the person I intended on marrying, the person who I was shared many years with already at that point, I wanted her to be able to make the decisions. And that's not how stuff works. If you're not legally married, there gets to be so much complexity. Like she doesn't have a right about anything. And so that's when it starts to get more crucial. It's like, hey, if you guys aren't getting married within the next couple months, we should really think about putting some of these estate planning documents in place. Something that would take care of that is a financial power of attorney, a general power of attorney, medical power of attorney. So what these power of attorneys are is saying basically whoever you name has the ability to act on these different things in your life. And usually those are used in incapacitation type situations. So I'm not dead. I'm just vegged out or unable to think properly on my own. And so it allows me to name someone who's not a direct family member to easily kind of manage these things. It helps navigate trickiness with family members too, because if you don't have these things in place, this is where it just gets super crucial. If even if now that me and Brittany are married, if something happened and she made the decision to pull the plug basically on my life because there wasn't a trajectory, and me and her had this conversation, we also have it in writing basically that, hey, this is what you're going to do. So my parents can't go back and be like, Lucas didn't want this. My brothers can't go to her and say, hey, Lucas wouldn't want this. Why did you do this? And so like this stuff
That's a
happens.
discussion that you and her had, and you plastered it on paper. It was signed, it was certified, and it was it recorded at the county with whatever, with that power of attorney and that will and whatnot, right? So the family, your mom, brothers, and uncles, whoever, they can't say, well, Lucas at one point said he didn't want this to happen, but then they don't know about the conversation that you and your wife, girlfriend, or whoever it is had after the fact. Now that you have, because our mind changes and our ideas change, and the person that we spend time with, our significant other, that's the person that we confide in for most of the part in time, and that is the person that should be making those decisions, and we should be able to tell and allow them to make that decision without repercussions from our blood extended family. So that's awesome. That's an awesome point. Thank you so much. And then we get into you created Level Up, and then you created a podcast. What's the idea behind the podcast?
So the biggest thing behind the podcast was I was getting interviewed kind of similar, like how you reached out to interview me, and I was having a lot of fun. Like it's fun going on and being a guest and being able to share this information. Like, and the purpose for it is making an impact on other people, just like how your podcast is to help others. That's the same purpose of mine. And that was the first kind of thing. And then it was just, I create a lot of content anyways. I create a lot of video. I create a lot of strategy guides, which are what I call my blog posts. I create cheat sheets, which are my infographics. And so I like creating things, but what happens, what I've found is sometimes I get tired of doing those things. Like my brain just isn't always in the infograph thinking or the video thinking or writing. And what I found is like, this is just a great medium to blend some of that stuff in, change some of those content around to make it a podcast form. And that's another thing too. Not everyone likes reading. Not everyone likes watching a video. And what I was finding is like a lot of my clients, a lot of my friends are like, hey, have you started a podcast? So ever since I launched my company, people have been pushing me to do it. And I just was having so much fun. And I just thought about what it could be. And my podcast is unique. I don't have a ton of listeners because I think of the uniqueness. What I do is I actually have guests kind of similar to how your show is, but then I rotate in just kind of a more solo episode where it's more financial literacy. And my guest spots are people in the tech world with awesome backgrounds, interesting backgrounds, inspiring backgrounds that I kind of get to share their story with someone that's struggling, hitting a wall, thinking that they're the only ones experiencing certain things. And so that's really what I want to share is if I see an interesting story on Twitter or LinkedIn, it's like, I'm so excited to find out more about that person, but then also share that with so many people. And it's so fun, as you know, Lassiter.
Yes, of course. I mean, I think I get a lot more benefit of talking to you and to all the other individuals that I interview, because it's very interesting, not only the time that we spend on the screen and on the podcast, but also looking at your LinkedIn, Googling to see what you got, looking at your company website, trying to figure out who you are before we actually meet, and then formulating some questions and some routine and layout of the conversation, how it's going to go. And then when we get to the actual interview, is if I find something that's really interesting, then we kind of go on that tangent and try to bring it back and rope it in. So that's kind of how I see it, and I think that's what you're referring to. So that's awesome. Yes. And so that's the podcast. So what obstacles have you found with launching the podcast?
Yeah. So with launching the podcast, I think the biggest thing is consistency. I do a lot of things, like I said, and then I get kind of burnt out on stuff. I don't know if you do this yourself, but I edit all my podcasts. I kind of do all that myself too. And so I have a family. I have 3 kids now, and so it's like
finding the time to do it is like, oh my God, you wish that you could spend time with the kids, but then you have this looming project that you start, and like, okay, you commit yourself to putting out a video a week, and you're like, oh, I got to find the time to actually edit. Editing's not that simple. You got to put it in, you got to cut some stuff out, you got to put some titles in it, you got to put some music at the intro, you got to actually talk at the intro or whatever. If you want to make it semi nice, that goes into it. So it takes a couple hours to kind of finesse and go through that process. So that's incredible. That's one of the obstacles that you have. Is there any other obstacles that you can kind of pinpoint at this point?
For the podcast, and that's definitely the biggest one, because it's more of my most fun kind of aspect, and I'm not doing this to generate business. I'm not trying to get people. I'm not selling people to be like, oh, you need to be clients. I don't have that many listeners, but if I did and all of them did want to work with me, I just wouldn't be able to serve them. I'm a single person. I'm not looking to expand my business past myself. At least for the foreseeable future. I might enjoy training someone and teaching someone at some point down the road. But yeah, I think prioritization, I think, is a big one. That the topics start coming, I think, really easy. I think the other thing, I guess now that I'm at the end of my 2nd season, it feels a lot more natural and comfortable to do the interviews. But yeah, lots of butterflies, a lot of scared of like, oh, is anyone going to listen? Is anyone going to show up? If I reach out to these people to be a guest, are they just going to ghost me or not show up? And it's been so amazing that everyone I've reached out to, practically everyone said yes, or they were just a little bit too busy. But if I did a percentage, I'd say 90% of the people or more just are like, oh yeah, let's get on there. And then that's what I love about it the most. If all I was doing was the financial topics, I would have burnt out. I would have stuck to my videos and the other stuff I do. But because I get to have that guest experience, and I'm sure me and you are going to be kind of connected, is kind of how I've noticed that what happens when I was on other people's podcasts before. And I wanted to provide that to my guests, make them feel like rock stars and just feel awesome about their journey. And yeah, that would be the other thing. There's been definitely a lot more challenges on the business side, though, for sure.
Right. Okay. For sure. So your podcast is called Techie Personal Finance Bootcamp, right?
Correct.
So
Yep.
with that title, I'm imagining that you seek out, as you mentioned, individuals with interesting stories that have to do with some sort of technology, some sort of business, innovation. What's your range of individuals to interview? And what's been the biggest surprise and unexpected reward that you've obtained so far?
Yeah. So the range, I've done a lot of boot camp. Like I don't know if you're familiar with Coding Boot Camp or if any of your listeners are, but I've found for my clients, a lot of them come from those boot camps. They made a career transition in their late 20s, 30s, 40s, and really changed their lives. And so that's what initially. I have a lot of boot camp grads. I have a lot of just career transition people. All of them are going to be in that tech space. They're all going to be techies. And yeah, some of them are self-taught, so they didn't even go a boot camp route. They just looked at YouTube, looked at all these resources online, and they taught themselves, got their first job, and changed their life. So lots of kind of life-changing things. People, if I see people share that they had a struggle early on, I had a couple of people with different felonies come on, and yeah, now it was tricky getting into the field, but now that they have experience, that the felony is so far in that the history, and compared to all the great positive uh, connections they've made and the positive work that they provided, that like they've it's crazy some of the stuff that people can do if they set their mind to it. And I think that's one of the biggest things is almost every one of the people I've reached out to had shared a challenge. And I was like, that is interesting. And I know a lot of people reach various challenges and they give up because they think it's too hard. But what I've also seen is the people that just stick around just a little bit longer end up getting over that hurdle and kind of breaking through. I kind of mentioned the challenges on my business. Same thing kind of happened on that end, and in so many other aspects of my life too. Like when I was, man, this super not going the way I want to. Like why won't it just work? I'm working so hard and I'm doing everything I can, and then all of a sudden, like the next day or the next week or the next month, like time is so tricky and relative to how we want to be focused on it. But usually everyone I've seen be successful, they've had those challenges and somehow they just found the support from their community. Has been a big conversation with a lot of my guests for this season, season 2, probably because of COVID. I think it's shining a lot more, that support, that community. Um, those were the types of people I have on though. And it's, it's so much fun.
That's so cool. That's so amazing. So for those boot camps and the videos that you have, you mentioned that there's no fees at this point for some of the videos. Now, is there a cost for any of the actual webinars, boot camps that you do if anybody wants to jump in and they want to follow any advice and get some training from you?
No, so all the content I create is free. So where people pay is like when they need that more one-on-one, like they're in a scheduled time on a calendar. I'm going to sit with them only. For all the content I create, it's goes online and gets kind of dispersed. I might try to make something a little bit more tailored, a little bit more polished, maybe that will be like a pay if you want. It'll be more organized and kind of like start here, go to this. That might be paid in the future, but I have any basic topic you can think of. I probably already have created a video and a strategy guide, and it's probably been on a podcast episode. So yeah, it's as simple as searching my website. And the only problem is it's probably not as well organized. Another thing I kind of do on my own. So that you might have to search around for those things. But if there's a topic you're looking for and you don't see it, reach out to me. That's a good invitation for me to create something and make it available for free, and anyone that needs access to that.
Awesome. Fantastic. Thank you so much. So at this point, what is the next step for Lucas Casares? You're a content creator, you're a podcaster, and you're a certified financial planner. You have surmounted so many obstacles. You have been able to transform and function in a very difficult situation during this pandemic. You are successful. What is next for you at this point?
Yeah, I think for me, successful is always a tricky word. And I think it is for a lot of people because there's always those moving targets. You hit something and it's like, yeah, what is next? And so you start working on some of those things. So some of the fun stuff that I'm working on to challenge myself right now, I'm in the middle of 30 days of live video that I'm pushing out to YouTube, Facebook, and Twitter every single day. So that's just something to get me to record even if I don't feel like it. And that's been awesome. I'm 13 days into that and developed a lot of good habits. And I think just speaking more freely, I don't have to edit it because it's live. And so that saves me some time too.
Yeah.
So that's something I'm excited about doing. None of this stuff revolves around money, which is nice. The other thing is I want to create a book for people that like me, like probably even you. Growing up, we don't have those people to teach us about the education and the finances. And what we see on TV, we see on Facebook and Twitter, it's usually fancy cars, money, money, money. You want to make the most money. That's how you'll be happy. And so the book I'm working on, and I need to kick myself in the butt, hopefully this holiday season, to get some more traction moving on it, is money is a tool. It's not the goal. There's so much more in life. My family's the greatest thing in the world. Like no amount of money would ever be able to change any of that. And so I think those are the things that I think are on the horizon, and then just be better at navigating and managing my businesses as they grow, my podcast as it grows, but making sure that I'm still intentional with being here for my family, especially during this time. It's been a crazy 2020.
Yeah, fantastic. So it seems like family, you keep on going back to family. Your immediate family, your wife and your kids are very important, and they have a big part of you that surrounds and looms over you. So that's amazing. That's incredible. And that I want to acknowledge that, because you've mentioned it quite a few times, and I didn't want to have that slip my mind. So I just wanted to congratulate you on that and making a conscientious decision to focus on that aspect. And that's amazing, incredible. This, I got a couple more questions, and this is a speed round essentially. So good leaders always create good leaders. Do you have any individuals you actually look up to, and who are your mentors?
Yeah. So big one, cousins. So my cousin and her husband, when my parents first moved to Colorado, when I was working my way through community college, trying to figure out what I wanted to do, I ended up living with them and renting out their basement. So that was the first time I ever had to pay rent. I started to learn some good responsibility there. They had young kids. I saw how awesome they were as parents. I saw how much they were invested in their job and always looking for growth there. So they were a huge. She actually got me my job at the community bank a few years before I ever moved in with them. So like there's a lot of connections there. So they got me that first real world job where I got a lot of experience. While I was living there, job opportunity came up where there was a management position. I was like, I'm 20 years old and all these other people are 40, 50. Like, I don't know if I'm qualified. And she's like, well, why not? Like, don't you want to do this type of stuff and become a manager? And I was like, I guess, but I'm only 20. Like, I'm not done with my associates. And somehow, some way between her and there's, they call it the compound. There's a lot of other family members that would come in and always have like parties and hang out on the weekends and stuff. So there was always a community of support there. So that's definitely who I go back to. She ended up being one of my first clients too. So it's so many different ways. And now I'm actually able to help her financially, which is kind of a crazy scenario because she taught me about that 401k. She taught me about the employer stock purchase plan because she had worked there and she had exposure to all that stuff. So it's pretty crazy how some of that stuff worked out.
That's awesome. And this right there, what he just said, everything, that's why it's important to have mentors, because they show you and see the potential in you. And they tell you about things that they've experienced firsthand that you probably have no idea that you could possibly do. And they open the door for your imagination to go wild and believe in who you are and what you can achieve if you put your mind and your work etiquette to work, essentially. So that's incredible. Thank you so much for that. If you could choose any superpower, or if you believe that you have a superpower, what is it and why?
It might be easier to think of like, if I have a superpower, I think one of the biggest things that I would have never expected before is that I care a lot. I care a lot about anything I say. If ever it would cause someone to go in the wrong direction or do the wrong thing. So I'm always very careful when I'm providing advice or creating free content to make sure I'm not steering people the wrong way. I care sometimes maybe even more than some of my clients. You're like, my clients want to improve and do the right thing and be confident about stuff, but like I want them to kill it. I want them to hit stuff out of the park. I want them to be ultra confident. So they have this aspiration of what they want to feel, and I want them to feel better in that. And I think that's my biggest thing is when I'm doing stuff, if I ever make a mistake, it cuts me down to the core. And I just want to always do as much as I possibly can. And sometimes it wasn't always a good thing when I was more of that employee status. I was probably overworking myself, approaching burnout. One of the reasons that probably led me to start my own company and create things a little bit more formatted. And again, kind of how things just worked out is I would have never known that I would be grown such a big family. We have 3 kids and all that. And being able to be around here, have more flexibility. I actually meet my clients at this same type of time that we're meeting, so I have more flexibility where I'm able to be with them during the day. That wasn't the case before. And it's so amazing. I would have never expected that I would have cared, or not necessarily cared, but I would have enjoyed it so much, being able to be around during the 9 to 5, and then 5 afterwards, being able to help people and still do what I really wanted to do. So I've been able to have more control over those things. And yeah, I found that I care a lot about family, which I didn't know. I thought I was going to be a workaholic, and that my family life could struggle when I was first thinking about my career and how I was going to work hard and just keep achieving, keep going. And I feel like I've been able to do those things, but also manage all that stuff as well.
Awesome. And having that balance allows your health, physical health, as well as mental and emotional health to all kind of be in one place at a certain time and make the whole complete at every single point. That's amazing. That's incredible. Is there any particular book, movie, or podcast that you believe has made an impact in your life and you wish more people would actually take advantage of it?
Um, so holiday season, It's a Wonderful Life means a lot to me. When I was a kid, it didn't mean anything to me. I was like, what is this black and white movie doing? Like, why we got to watch it every year? When I was a young adult, I was probably about the time when a lot of stuff started changing for me. When I was 21 or about to turn 21, one of my childhood best friends committed suicide. And like that changed a lot of how I thought about stuff. But then I think that's probably about the same time where I'm like, all right, like I just need to actually take more control over my life, like get serious about school. That's when I started getting focused, like what do I want to do next? Started being more intentional about trying to make things happen instead of waiting for things that happen to me, and just make the most out of my life. And I think that's when a lot of that's why that movie hits so strong to me. He also works at a bank, which I was working at a bank at a time, and I worked at a bank half my career. And there's a lot of financial stuff. There's a lot of families struggling financially in that movie, if you're familiar with it. So there's a lot of people that could be losing their homes or having to sell it to the rich people, which same story going on today, right? Where that's a big issue right now, the 1%, and then everyone else who's trying to like figure out, well, who's making all the money, and
Yeah.
why are things not always equitable?
Mm-hmm.
So
So that movie.
yeah, that movie
Yeah.
does it for me because it still sticks around today. As old as it was, black and white, like all that stuff is super relevant today.
Yes, it is, and all that you mentioned, it in one way, form, or shape, it does touch and it reflects today's struggles as they were when that movie was made, even those many years ago. We kind of touched on this, or you kind of touched on this, and this question is about your definition of success. You mentioned that success is different for you and for everybody. Success changes for a person from time to time.
Yep.
So your past self had a perspective of success, your present self has a perspective of success, and your future self will have a different perspective of success. But right now, what is your present definition of success at this point?
Yeah. So you actually outlined it when you were trying to sum up some of what I was talking about. It's that balance. I would have never expected this before, but probably since that period, since I started having responsibility, getting engaged, having kids, and seeing like how if some of this stuff like goes off balance, like how you feel about it, you don't feel good about it. Other people don't feel about it. So balance is super incredible to me. I bring it to the financial plan in my conversations with clients. Like I don't want my clients to be the richest person in the world. I want them to enjoy life today and enjoy life tomorrow and enjoy life 20 years from now and 30 years from now and have confidence in that. And so I'm always, that's a lot of how I want to help people just maximize their life, make the most of it. We don't know how much time we have here. And that's always been something that I just kind of think of as you don't necessarily want to use that as a reason to spend every single dollar, but it is a reason to try to find that efficiency, make sure that everything you're doing it with intention, and just trying to focus on being happy. If you're not happy, try to figure out why. The live video challenge I did today, I did it on the definition of insanity and how to break some of those things, because there's a lot of people, it's hard. Like if you are stuck in something for a while, you just kind of keep looping around, and you need to find a way to break that cycle. And that takes with that first step, that first action. That's one thing that I don't know when I developed it, but I just kind of figured out like when I finally catch like, hey, I'm not feeling right, I'm not feeling myself or whatever, like let's take action to actually move me in that other direction. And somehow you're never perfectly in balance. It's always like a teeter-totter thing, but I think that I do manage to make it work. And it's something that to me, I feel like I'm successful for that reason.
Right. Yeah, awesome. Yes, if you feel successful for that day, that's what matters. If you find that balance, if it makes you happy, that's what matters, and that's what the definition of success is for you at this point. That's incredible. This last question, I really enjoy asking this last question from every single guest. I want you to imagine yourself being able to get into a time machine as you can go back, and I want you to go back to that 21-year-old fellow, that Lucas, 21-year-old, back when everything started to change, when gangs were kind of more prevalent in your life at some
Mhm.
point, where you were kind of trying to figure out what you were doing, still kind of finagling the community college scenario, trying to find what you really wanted to do. If you could go back and spend 2 to 3 minutes to share 2 to 3 pieces of advice with that young Lucas, what would you actually share with that individual at this point to make him successful?
Yeah, to make them successful. So I've always felt like I was gonna be successful. I think that's probably one of the things that helps me get out of funks sometimes. But yeah, that specific time made me go back. That was a turbulent time period. So yeah, just remind myself like, hey, remember how you feel confident that you can work as hard as you need to and do the right things and things are going to work out. Like it's definitely going to. Stuff is crazy right now. Stuff is constantly going to be crazy. There's never going to be a things that are going to occur where it's just a clean slate. Like, yes, I feel successful today, but it's probably like 6 days out of 7 or 95% of the time. It's never perfect, but like you're going to be able to do these things and maybe don't put your head down so hard and run so hard at some of these things. Try to use that brains, try to be strategic, well thought out. Um, still have that drive and energy and bring that. But I think a lot of times if I was facing something, I would just put my head down and just be like, nope, I'm going to make this work. One of the frustrations I had at that particular point in time, I was trying to figure out or finish my community college associate's degree, and I was trying to get some promotion at the bank to an even higher level. And they're like, oh, you need a college degree or this type of experience. It's like, that's messed up. Like I know I could do it. Like I obviously need training, but I learned stuff really quick. And that's part of being young and naive and just saying like, yeah, let me do everything. I don't need experience and stuff like that. So just, yeah, probably ground myself in reality a little bit more like, hey, these things are going to come, you're going to make them happen, and just be confident, be smart. Don't 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 be too bullheaded all the
Yeah,
time.
yeah, that's incredible advice, and that has served you well following through, and now you can apply that for the future that's
Yeah.
coming in your life. With
Oh,
that, I want to
can I add
acknowledge
one
you.
more thing?
Was that?
Can I add one more thing?
Yes, you may.
So it's not about money.
Go ahead.
I think at that point I still was like, yeah, I want to buy houses. I want to have real estate. I want to raise to the top of all these different things and make a lot of money. It's not about the money. So
It's not about the money. Do not chase the money. It'll come if you do the
yes,
right thing, if you follow the integrity, if you stick with your internal core values and you know who you are and you actually do things as you are doing to help the community at large, it'll come in dividends to you. So that's essentially what's happening right now from what I can understand and see from your life at this point. With this, I want to acknowledge you for the fantastic things that you've accomplished, for being a fantastic husband, a fantastic father that puts priority and integrity into your life and your everyday work that you have with your clients and with your own personal family that you support and that you actually help financial advice and planning that you do. Thank you so much, Lucas Casares. Thank you so much for joining me in Success Innovation. Thank you so much to the audience, to the listeners, for taking an opportunity and learning about this wonderful individual and the opportunities that we shared here today with you. Thank you so much. This has been Lázaro Herrera for Success Innovation. Have a wonderful night. Bye-bye. Thank you for finishing another fantastic episode with Success Innovation. I had a fantastic conversation with Lucas Casares, who shares so much insightful information as to what financial literacy is. We discovered some of the main topics most people have trouble dealing with, which is cash flow, life insurance, and estate planning. We learned about how he decided to venture as a sole proprietor of his own business and how he has made it move forward. Thank you, Lucas Casares, for your time and conversation with me. This has been Lázaro Herrera for Success Innovation. I'll see you next time. Bye-bye.